History often turns not with thunder, but with a moment so quiet it almost feels unreal. On the night of November 4th, 1995, a crowd gathered in Tel Aviv to listen to music, speeches, and the language of possibility. Among them stood Israel's Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, a man shaped by war, now standing at the center of an argument about peace. Minutes later, he would be gone. To understand why that moment still echoes, we have to begin long before that night. Before the rallies, before the negotiations, at the start of a life formed by conflict. Yitzhak Rabin was born in Jerusalem in 1922, during a time when the land was governed by the British and defined by uncertainty. Violence was not abstract. It was part of daily life. As a young man, Rabin joined Jewish defense organizations, and by the time Israel became a state in 1948, he was already a soldier in its fight for survival. War shaped Rabin early and permanently. He was not a fiery speaker or political performer. He was quiet, disciplined, and methodical. Those who knew him often described him as cautious, even reserved. He believed decisions carried weight, and that weight demanded responsibility. Rabin rose through the military ranks, eventually becoming Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, he commanded Israel's military at a moment that would redefine the region. The victory made him a national figure, but it also deepened his understanding of power, cost, and consequence. After leaving the military, Rabin entered politics. He served as Israel's ambassador to the United States and then became prime minister in the 1970s. His first term was difficult and politically turbulent, but it set the stage for his return years later, at a time when the world itself was changing. By the early 1990s, the Cold War had ended. Old alliances were shifting. New diplomatic paths seemed possible. In 1992, Rabin was elected prime minister again, leading a government willing to test whether decades of conflict could be reduced. Not resolved overnight, but managed differently. That effort led to the Oslo Accords, agreements designed as a step-by-step process, built on gradual change rather than instant peace. For some Israelis, Oslo represented cautious hope. For others, it represented unacceptable risk. The country became deeply divided, not along simple lines of left and right, but along questions of security, trust, and the future. Rabin understood this division. He acknowledged fear as real, not imagined, but he also believed that endless conflict carried its own danger. On November 4th, 1995, Rabin attended a peace rally in Tel Aviv. It was meant to project unity during uncertainty. As the event ended, Rabin walked down the steps toward his car. Then came the shots. He was struck by an Israeli extremist opposed to the peace process. Rabin was rushed to the hospital. Within hours, the Prime Minister of Israel was dead. The perpetrator was Yigal Amir, a 25-year-old Israeli law student at Bar-Ilan University and a former participant in the Hesder program. Amir was strongly opposed to Rabin's peace initiatives, particularly the signing of the Oslo Accords, which he believed involved territorial concessions that endangered Jewish security and undermined what he viewed as historically and religiously significant land claims in the West Bank. Amir framed his actions through a concept drawn from Jewish religious law known as din rodef, or pursuer law. In traditional interpretation, this doctrine permits preemptive action against an individual believed to pose an imminent threat to life. Amir argued that Rabin's policies constituted such a threat and that, under his interpretation of this principle, Rabin could be considered a pursuer. Legal scholars and religious authorities overwhelmingly rejected this interpretation, emphasizing that din rodef does not sanction political violence and does not apply to democratic decision-making by elected officials. The shock was immediate and profound. A nation accustomed to external threats now confronted something different: political violence from within. Vigils filled city squares, schools stopped classes. World leaders arrived for the funeral. For many, the question was not only what had happened, but how it could have happened. In the days that followed, the government moved forward, but the political atmosphere had changed. Negotiations continued, but trust was thinner. Consensus was harder to reach. The peace process did not collapse overnight, but it proceeded under increased political and public constraint. Over time, Rabin's assassination came to be remembered as a turning point, not because one man alone could determine history, but because his death exposed how fragile political systems become when division turns personal and disagreement turns absolute.